Hello, good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Garces-Donay. Welcome to Pink Mike Legal Confessions. I have Patrick here with me, our old-time guest. He is wonderful. I can't wait till you guys hear from him. He's a repeat guest on our show, so make sure you guys say hello to him. As you know, I am the owner of Garces Law Firm, a Arlington Heights law firm in Illinois, where we help people secure their legacies and not forget about their legacies, especially when it comes to their children or divorce or life changes or unexpected absences, which is what we're going to talk about today. So I am here with special guest Patrick Slaughter. He's an attorney, very successful, does divorce and immigration. He actually represents clients going through divorce, custody, and some other family law matters. Patrick, is always a pleasure to have you on the show, and I extremely just want everyone to know how extremely grateful I am for Patrick's knowledge. We were talking about some immigration stuff before we started, and also the divorce stuff. So all of that's combined in here. So if you have questions along the way, he does have immigration knowledge. So feel free to ask him questions about that. So thank you for taking the time to speak with us today, Patrick. Really appreciate that. So before we jump into Patrick's background, one of the things we're going to talk about today is there's been a lot of questions recently in my practice, I'm sure for Patrick as well, is how divorce usually comes up at some point in people's lives. And so frequently they come to our office to meet with us about their will, their trust, their estate plan, what happens to my kids if I divorce my spouse, or even people that aren't married, they come and say, well, I don't want my child's father to be part of the picture, and that is complicated, but we'll get to that in a second. So all of this stuff is really the basis of today's conversation, so that you guys can get a better understanding of why this matters and why, quite frankly, you may want to tune into this, because if you don't have questions about this, you might know someone who does. So Patrick, I'm excited to be able to have you on the show again to share your experience and insights as always. So what's it like to update or change your will or trust after a divorce? So before we begin, Patrick, can you please graciously give us a background on you and what you do?
Oh Lord, let's see. I own a law firm called Lefevre and Slaughter in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's in the northeastern portion of the state, and we handle exclusively family law matters and family immigration matters. And because of my immigration experience, it seems that we handle a lot of international divorces and things of that sort. Now with COVID, everybody is determined that when Bobby Joe has been stuck with Billy Sue at home for way too long, and you add alcohol into the mix, and then you find out that little Timmy's teacher really wasn't the problem, the divorce rate has really gone up. And there's a lot of unintended consequences that occur when people don't stay on top of these things, and some of which we'll talk about. But we deal with folks coming in quite literally mad as I'll get out. I got to watch my language. I can't even use the words they say. Mad in a hornet because of things that attorneys sometimes do or don't do or should have done. And it's hard to fix a problem once it's become a problem. Easy to fix it beforehand, but afterwards can turn into a big hullabaloo. And with about 50% of marriages ending in divorce, you can almost bet that you or somebody you know is going to go through one. So being prepared to deal with the things that can pop up is something you really want to prepare yourself for. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm happy to answer questions about that or the things that I deal with where people are mad as all heck. But I'll let Stephanie lead me through. She's way too kind to me. She just thinks I'm funny. So that's it.
You are funny because I'll never forget when we first did our first show. You mentioned to me something like, I told you, oh, I don't know, I'm kind of nervous, like I don't know what we should talk about. And you're like, don't worry, my audience, they know who I am. It was like
Yeah.
we were showing our socks, on the show.
Dark winged duck socks. I know. I'm very happy about my dark winged duck socks.
Are you still wearing socks right now? Because I certainly have flats on, so I don't have I don't have any socks on.
I'm not going to reveal the answer to that. I'm wearing loafer shoes. I'll tell you that much.
All right, you'll have to tune into the end to see if he has his socks on. So we're going to dive in. So this is an interesting topic. I mean, ask any divorce attorney, and Patrick, I know you're going to agree with this, is that during COVID, we have seen a rise, like an astronomical rise in divorce rates. I mean, I know that we always can have, our spouse, we love them, or our significant other, yes, they're great. But every so often people are like, wow, this COVID thing really is testing my relationship. It's testing my marriage. And I had people say this to me more and more, and I think I underestimated what they meant, because now Patrick's busier than ever, and and so,
our phones won't quit ringing. I keep telling people, "Are you sure you want to do that?" There's a rumor in town. In our office, we deal with the meanest, nastiest custody fights and really huge asset divorces. And a lot of other attorneys in town refer those to us. And I'm like, I'm not sure if that's because they like us or they really don't like us. But we get a lot of those cases. So we get an opportunity to deal with all kinds of unique problems that sometimes you sit down and go, I'm pretty sure this is somebody from the bar and this is some kind of bar exam question they're testing out. You could make some of this stuff up. I don't even have cable TV at the house because of this stuff.
It's better than cable TV. And that's kind of what I wanted to brief everyone on, is that decade-long marriages are now ending, and it's kind of sad. And so the positive side,
Bill Gates and Melinda, 27
I was just going to say, last night I was joking with my husband when we were watching TV, and I said, man, I wish I was Mrs. Gates. No, just kidding. But like, but hey,
I've told Zena's my wife. I said, it's cheaper to keep me at this point. I'm housebound.
But this is a good example. I mean, even the celebrities, the high status and net worth. I mean, can you imagine a divorce like that, Patrick? I mean, that would be, and I don't know if there's a prenup or not, but let's just pretend there is one or is
not. There's
not. Well, there you go. There you go. So prenups for another day. But no, prenups do become relevant sometimes most times in estate planning. But yeah, so kind of like in general, right? Like countless people are reconsidering like their decisions of, hey, should I remain married to this person and the person I have children with? And so this is spiking, and it's crazy because it's like even the birth rate is spiking. So it's like there's a lot going on in the world outside of the fact that
one extreme or the
other. Exactly. So coming from not only from someone who's been, kind of around divorcees, but like as an attorney, Patrick, what's like a day in the life of like working with clients to get through their divorces? I mean, do you kind of get like the beginning to end feel, or how does that work? I mean, like literally from beginning to end, do you find the facts up front? Do you find them along the way?
Oh, I find the facts that my client believes up front, but there's a difference in what you know and what you believe. So as the case matures, you find out that some of those beliefs are well taken, but a number of them aren't, and that there's a whole lot of other facts that may be necessarily involved in the divorce. But generally, it's always a work in progress, especially the kind of cases we have where we have more complicated, complex things. We were just talking, I mean, with folks coming in from other portions of the country, other portions of the world, it's not unlikely to have a transnational asset that has to be discovered and dealt with. You have international custody issues. What happens when, a couple divorces and one spouse decides to relocate back to their home of origin, and that's outside the U.S.? How do you work out a custody arrangement that respects the rights of both folks? There's a number of things that can complicate what would seem to be an ordinary or easy situation. It's just not the facts today. The world's a lot smaller than it used to be. We have lots more people coming in and leaving, and because of that, it's not unusual to have immigration or international assets or things play into a divorce. And somebody asked me how you hold property in Jordan. I don't know. I'm going to have to go through a process to find out. Or what do you do with a divorce that's already been entered in Egypt, but isn't recognized necessarily by the U.S.? How does a court here deal with that? Who has jurisdiction? What court has jurisdiction if one party is in, Yugoslavia, or what used to be Yugoslavia, Serbia, and suddenly they want to get divorced, and there's a party here that doesn't want to agree to that? These are all cases that we've had in some way, form, or fashion, and we didn't know either going into it. I think the attorneys that say, "Oh, we know everything," I want to meet them because I'm not one of them.
Oh, I appreciate you being candid about that, Patrick, because I agree with you. I mean, I find myself like running into those issues all the time. Is immigration. I know we haven't talked too much about that in other topics, but that we've discovered through Pink Mike. But actually, immigration issues and assets and all that stuff. I mean, even like across the state, and it's worse across the country. Do you find yourself kind of trying to keep up with everything? Because I know that the law currently changes all the time, and it's like if you don't keep up, you're behind. I
feel like a freshman at MIT. When they go in, they start learning all this complex technical stuff. They're told that by the time you graduate, what you've learned will be outdated. That's the way I feel about things in immigration law right now. It's kind of a wait and see approach. Regardless whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whatever that is, that doesn't matter. The law is the law, but the law is in a state of flux, and some things are being enforced, some things aren't, and it's hard to give really good advice when things are always changing. So a lot of it is let's find out, wait
Yeah,
and see.
absolutely.
Um,
Well, and I think besides the fact, like someone's immigration status, or perhaps where people are located and where their significant other is located, has a lot to do with what you're going to advise. But what are some of the other things that you consider when it comes to protecting, like just the general person? Like, let's say they don't have issues with like who is what where, but what are some other things you think about when you're considering protecting someone's assets as far as like as a divorce attorney? I mean, do you ever have like, okay, like I'm representing this person, I have to do this for this person?
we have a ton of post-divorce actions because something wasn't dealt with appropriately during the divorce. The number one thing that I think we deal with is somebody will come in and say, "Hey, my spouse died, and somebody else got their life insurance. What do I get?" Or somebody was married and their husband died, and their ex-wife was the beneficiary of the life insurance policy, and they got the life insurance policy, and they want me to fix it, and I go, that ship has sailed. That's a contractual arrangement outside of the law, outside of the
Absolutely.
law system, and that's hard to do. So you have that, or you have pretermittent children, where you have somebody that was, a child that was born after a will was put in place, and you're trying to decide, hey, do they take under the will or do they not? These are all family law issues, and if there's been a divorce decree that affects these things, you have to figure out what can I do that still coincides with and respects and honors the divorce decree, but also deals with this change in situation that I have in my life. My
Yeah.
recommendation is every time there's a change in any kind of legal status, you need to update your will or your estate plan, because if you have a child, that will impact it. If you get divorced, obviously that will impact it. If somebody dies, obviously that impacts it. And not just you or your spouse. It's not unusual to have an uncle, or an aunt die. And
Yeah.
the question is, what happens? We have a estate planning case right now. We're litigating probate, where a father didn't want his one child to receive anything, but then that person passed away. The mother received everything through a trust that was never funded, but got everything else through a residuary clause. And now the son had mother change her will. Mother got mad as heck about something, decided to do it on her own, and it was the benefit of our client. And it's a really it's a mess. We're hoping we can resolve it in mediation, because to litigate that is going to be very expensive. Somebody's not going to be happy at all at the end of it, and they might spend a good portion of the estate paying lawyers. And let's face it, nobody really wants to pay lawyers. If they
Yeah.
don't, they don't want
Yeah.
to pay.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I've been doing probate cases myself, Patrick, and I know for a fact, like this is stuff that like you brought up a great point. Like somebody went another way to change their will. Maybe I don't even know how they did it. Like, I get a lot of calls on that. Like people will say, well, I don't have to like really get a lawyer. I could just go online. That's a really popular thing to do. And I'm like, do you realize that's basically like saying I'm going to go on a you might as well have gone on a plane and jumped out without a parachute, because you're hoping for the best, but you don't even know if it's valid in Illinois or whatever state you're going to be in. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
I usually ask, would you like to give yourself anesthesia and conduct an appendectomy on yourself? Doctors may keep you alive, but lawyers are the ones that make you decide whether you want to be or not.
Yeah,
If you're not understanding the words on the paper, then you might have a problem. And
absolutely.
that's the issue. A lot of these folks will try to do an agreed divorce between themselves, and then it's a mess, and they go in front of the judge, and everything gets thrown out, and then they're mad as hell, and they call me back, and I'm like, well, if you called me initially, it would have been this, but now you're going to pay me a whole lot more to try to unravel the mess that you've created. That, trust me, I would rather not have to unravel. But
Yeah.
if you get a lawyer at the beginning, then at least you're assured that you're going the direction you really want to go. You're not just heading somewhere you think you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that you talked about when there's a change in your life. I mean, I call them life events, is what I like to say, but sometimes people forget, like they say, oh, I made a will for my kid, my first kid, and that was 20 years ago. I'm like, but don't you have like 2 more kids since then? Oh yeah, but you know, it's like, that is 100% the reason why you should even consider, you know, seeing an attorney who does estate planning to help you with that. Because if you don't update it now, then when? I always tell my clients, later never comes. When they say, I'm going to do it later, later never comes. Later never comes. Like, if I think about that, when you say, so I'm going to do that later, do you do it? I mean, it's like, probably not.
Well, my wife makes sure that I do. I don't have a choice. But you know, I will say that, you know, especially now with the whole flux in the tax situation, you know,
Yeah,
before marital protection trusts were kind of dried up because the exemption went up so high.
right.
But now I understand that's back on the table. And, you know, suddenly it becomes an issue. If, you know, I'm married to, you know, my wife, and I don't want, if when I pass away, for any potential husband she might marry after the case to be able to spend the money that I'm giving her. But it's, you know, if I just give it to her in the will, that can be a problem. So
Yep.
creating a trust for her benefit is a way to get around that. And now that probably will have better tax consequences than it did before, because it is likely, I believe, and I don't know this, but it is likely that exemption is going to be lowered, because I believe under President Trump it was, you know, pushed up there really high.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I think is going to generate a lot of business that needs to be attended to because of unintended tax consequences of these things.
Yeah, exactly. And taxes are always a thing that, you know, it's very politically driven. So depending on who's in office and if it's an election year, there's just so many changes and stuff like that. And that's a great point. And kind of another point as to why, if you do get divorced or in the middle of some sort of change in your life, you should definitely get some stuff looked at, because at the very least, our consultations are free. And I'm sure, Patrick, yours are likely free too, maybe, question mark? No, free. Okay. Well, anyway, you have good consultation. So like in general, you want to make sure that you're getting people the information. Because to me, I think sometimes people think I did this one will, I did this one thing. And even I had someone call me the other day saying, I want to disinherit my, you know, son or daughter or whatever. And then they said, well, I might change my mind. And I said, well, you know, if you do change your mind, you need to change your mind like before you've, you know, passed away, because if you don't change it. So that sort of thing matters. I think people, they get mad at each other, they make a will, and then they're not mad anymore. It's like, you just have so many reasons to check in.
You know, things happen. I had an aunt pass away, last week, as a matter of fact. Well, towards the beginning of last
Oh, I'm
week,
sorry for your loss.
from COVID, and you know, she was fine. She went in the hospital, and a month later, she passes away. It was completely unexpected. And everybody's, well, that's COVID. We're getting COVID under control. There's all kinds of life circumstances. You just never know how
Oh,
long
sure.
you're here. But even outside of the whole, what happens if I die? You know, what happens if I'm not able to make decisions about, you know, do I want to go on a ventilator or not, or do I want these different things to occur? You know, you can have these ideas, you can express them to your children or whoever you want, but that doesn't mean a doctor in a hospital can go through with what they're saying. So
Absolutely.
you need to be prepared to just kind of deal with all of that, and to save your loved ones the trouble of trying to figure it out. I'm lucky my mother and father, they're getting a little older, but they've both, you know, gone through some other attorneys besides me to make sure that everybody knows what to do. And I'm grateful for that, because I wouldn't have any idea.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and
but
it's nice too to talk about that, Patrick, because the powers of attorney, I always tell people like that it's not something that, because there's a big myth, I feel like sometimes with trust, for example, people, or even wills, people will say, oh, that's for rich people. Like I get that all the time. And powers of attorneys are not for rich people. Powers of attorneys are for humans. We're all human. So, you know, if you're human, then that you should have one. And it's so funny because I always tell people, regardless of your income, regardless of your background, for the reasons you just stated, the powers of attorney, they're powerful documents. I mean, those are documents that the physicians have to comply with, assuming it's done correctly. And no, you should not get it offline, because those are not accepted. Sometimes they'll reject them just offhand.
And then there's other things, like in Tennessee, we have a thing called a power of attorney for child care, which is particularly important for folks who have questionable immigration status, who are concerned about being deported or removed from the country. That would allow them to appoint someone to care for their child if they were removed, at least in the state of Tennessee. And there's some limitations to that power of attorney, but it can serve other things other than just, hey, this is what's going to happen. Powers of attorney are really strong things. We use them in our practice to help clients give us discovery information. Sometimes it's easy if you'll sign a POA for us. I can go get the information for you, and I know what I'm looking for, and you don't have to struggle with it for 3 weeks.
Absolutely.
Or you want to sell a property where your children are located and you're not. Like I live in Florida a good portion of the time. I live in Tennessee a good portion of the time. I can sign a power of attorney to have someone else execute real estate sales documents or things of that sort. There's a lot of things you can do that way, but you're not going to think of them yourself, and you're sure not going to be able to get the right kind of document offline because you don't know what you're looking for.
Exactly.
Like me trying to prescribe myself medicine for a GERD situation. I don't know what panoprozoline does or any of those other ones. It's easier to talk to somebody who can read the language and knows what they're doing and just give you what you want, or you can take your chances, but when you do, you may not be happy with the result.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking of the difference between like a medical thing, like if you were to operate on yourself, you're going to see that that's not a good idea immediately. With legal documents, you may not see it right away, but as soon as you need them, that's when it comes up, and it's too late to change them. And so, absolutely, we actually use powers of attorney quite often for real estate transactions as well, because I do have a lot of clients that are out of the state, out of the country. They can't make it here. I had a client that was in a military base, I think somewhere in like the Middle East, and we got a power of attorney from there. So a lot of power behind those documents for anyone that's listening, because again, regardless of income, regardless of your background, you should certainly have one, because in the event of a health issue, or even if you're unable to make decisions on your behalf, there's also the financial power of attorney that we use in Illinois. That's for the banks. The banks just turn you away if you don't have it. You could be like, I'm my dad's daughter or whatever, and they'll say, good for you, but you don't have the power to be here, so they make you go home. So people get really frustrated. We get calls on that all the time. So if you are interested in that, feel free to check in with us, because at the very least, at least a consultation will let you know what these documents do. So one of the questions we got while I was sitting here, someone had asked, do you have any recommendations on the timing of when the discussion about updating my will or trust should happen when someone's having their soon-to-be ex?
When you're getting ready to get divorced.
Basically.
First off, if you have a competent divorce attorney, they should be asking you those questions on their own, because typically to dissolve a marriage, whether through trial or through mediation, and let's be honest, most of them are handled in mediation,
right,
you need to be prepared to address what those property interests are. So during your divorce, if you're getting ready to get divorced, you need to ask, okay, what insurance policies are there out there, and who are the beneficiaries of those? And how are we going to deal with that? Are we going to leave it the way it is? Are we going to change it? Are we going to give somebody the freedom to change it? That can be important, because a number of states have case law that will require, if someone owes an alimony obligation, to maintain a life insurance policy to secure that alimony obligation in case they pass away, to make sure the beneficiary spouse is paid. Those are things that need to be discussed during the divorce. Also, things with children. If you have grown children and you are intending to do certain things, it is better to commemorate that in a marital dissolution agreement or some other kind of court order, because once you're divorced, people can do what they want if it's not really outlined or detailed plainly enough. So as part of our divorce process, we always go through, okay, what insurance policies are there? What retirement policies are there? Are we dividing policies by qualified domestic relations order? Do we want to include a survivorship clause in that? I'm teaching a class to lawyers about this tomorrow, and that's the most commonly made mistake on lawyers' behalf, is they won't include survivorship. So when the spouse who receives the benefit passes away, the other spouse stops receiving a benefit they may have become accustomed to getting. So that can be a problem. Just making sure that these things get done. A lot of times people are so excited to be divorced that they forget that there's other stuff that has to happen. And, divorce attorneys, I am one, and if it's a simple estate, yeah, I can do some of those things. But if it's more involved, I'm going to refer you to an estate planning attorney, because let's face it, Stephanie, you do with that more than I do, and you do with it every day.
Yep.
I can get you divorced. I'm good at that. But when you want to start talking about, expensive kinds of trusts and pour-over trusts and this marital protection trust, I know what they are. I would trust somebody else to create those documents before myself. because I'm going to contract them out to somebody. So you need to be prepared and realize that when you're going through divorce, your life and everybody in your families is changing. And it's better to have that change evaluated by somebody who can help you to figure out where you want to go forward rather than just leave that to happenstance.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you said that your attorney should be asking you that, especially from a divorce standpoint. You should not be waiting to the last minute, because I think sometimes people think, okay, I have to get this done first and then I'll deal with that later. But again, like I said before, later never comes. So you have to do this from the beginning, because again, a lot of times when the divorces happen, I think people underestimate how much leverage they have at that time to try to get something in the decree or kind of sort it out that we can then firm up and actually help protect, around what they've created at the estate planning stage. So sometimes, I've had people come to me on the opposite side, Patrick, where they say, I'm going to get divorced, I think, maybe, but I just want to update, we have an estate plan. And I always say to them, well, you realize that, if you're going to get divorced, so you think, you may consider doing this like now, because in general, it's very difficult sometimes to create stuff with a couple that's married, however, like maybe unhappily married, and are going to get divorced, because now I'm thinking, okay, I've advised this person to go see a divorce attorney. Are they going to do it? I don't know. And so it becomes a little bit complicated because it's like in the reverse. So,
I think that happens with children a lot too. I'll see folks will come in. I'll represent a husband or wife, doesn't matter which one, and they will have things that they want to be for the benefit of their children, but one spouse isn't necessarily in agreement with that. And there's not, for most jurisdictions, most judges aren't going to say, well, I'm going to force you to do this for your grown child. The grown child doesn't have a standing or doesn't have any reason to be involved in that case. So, what do you do for those children in that kind of situation? Well, you can, through negotiation, I don't know, you can do it at trial, but you can create a trust for the benefit of those children.
Right.
Suddenly, you have ways of dealing with things in a divorce that can protect people down the line when they don't have the same obligations that they do currently. And then there's questions about whether you're using marital property or separate property to create these things. It's easier to do that on the front end than to wait until somebody dies and a child realizes, well, you're out of luck because you were born after that marriage 20 years ago. And that's an issue. Or like in Tennessee, you can write your spouse out of a will, but she still has a right to claim against the will and still receive certain benefits. And if you don't have that kind of information, then you can do something that seems to make a whole lot of sense to you, but it doesn't have the impact that you think it will, or it can do just the opposite. If you'd left something for a spouse, it would have allowed her not to claim against the will, get a year's maintenance, pay legal fees. It would have been cheaper to have left him or her something rather than go through that process. Or with property, a lot of times, I want to bequeath something, I want to leave something to my kids. Okay, that sounds great. So now there are tenants in common on the property that nobody can decide who owns, and they're going to have to pursue a partition action to separate that and force it to be sold, and how that's going to happen. There's, by talking to a professional that understands how things actually occur once
in real life, yep,
it could be easier to plan for that than have this honeymoon idea that, when I die, my children are just going to keep the house and it's going to be divided between them. It never happens that way.
Absolutely, Patrick. I can't tell you how many times people will say, well, I was told, and I'm like, I don't know who told them this, but I was told that it's better to have nothing because the laws make everyone an heir. I'm like, that's not the point, and that's not necessarily true. I mean, depending on the family dynamic. I mean, I've had people say, this person is, when we go to sign documents or even during the consultation, they'll say, I have a spouse. I'm like, well, are you legally married? Well, no. It's like, we need to know that though, So, and actually, I just want to recap because we had a couple of people that just joined us. So my name is attorney Stephanie Garces-Donay. I'm the owner of Garces Law Firm. I have a law firm practice that does estate planning, real estate, and probate work as well. So we help parents protect their legacy, individuals really just prepare for the unexpected. So today on Pink Mike Legal Confession Live, we have Patrick Slaughter. He is an awesome divorce attorney with a lot of knowledge. So he is kind of letting us know a little bit more about how you can navigate through a divorce, what you should think about, and quite frankly, what it's like to update or change your will or trust during or after a divorce, which you should still be considering in the midst of getting divorced. Like Patrick said, people get so excited that, yes, I'm going to get this divorce and I'm going to get this money. You really got to think about your legacy. Don't leave it up to chance. So if you missed our last episode, by the way, it was about child advocacy, how to fight for your education of your children during COVID-19 and all the craziness that's going on. So you can watch it on my Facebook page and my YouTube page as well. So just if you're looking to catch up on that, it is there. So you can join us on Tuesdays at 1:00 Central Time. So we're always here to share tips and help parents and guardians and families understand things that they wouldn't have known when they started watching us. So kind of going back to what we were saying, Patrick. So this is kind of a funny question because it came in earlier and I was trying to make sense of it. So someone is asking, do I have the right to take my soon-to-be ex out of my will? And should I do that before and after a divorce? So that's like a loaded question because we were just talking about this.
The truth is you have the right to do with your will whatever you want to.
Exactly.
The problem is if there's obligations imposed by a court, then if you violate those obligations, once you're deceased, you're probably not going to care, but your relatives are going to have to fight a legal battle because someone can make a claim against your estate. Let's say that you have an alimony. You're a wife and you make $1 million a year, and your husband makes $100,000 a year, and as part of your divorce settlement, you've agreed to pay him $100,000 a year in alimony for whatever reason. You didn't have a good divorce attorney. I didn't represent you, so you're paying this in alimony, and you pass away. Well, if you've changed your will and made sure that he doesn't get anything, like we would probably tell you to do if there wasn't a court order, then he can come back and sue your estate to say, hey, this is an unfulfilled alimony obligation, and I want my portion out of that estate. And then, your heirs, if they don't want to agree with that, and chances are they won't, then they're going to be going to court and paying lawyers to fight over that. So you can change your will anytime you want to. Nobody's going to be the will police to come in with a big blaring red signal going, no, you can't do it. You can do it, but you need advice as to whether you should do it. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And that's how you find out, by talking to, a estate planning lawyer, a probate lawyer. Find out those answers before you get yourself in trouble. Or you can say, well, I'm going to die. It's not going to matter to me. They can deal with it. That's one way you're being remembered, I guess.
I got to get a T-shirt that says "Will Police" on it because that's what I'm going to wear during my consultations. They just want you to know. It's funny. Only an attorney would think that's a funny joke. Otherwise, people are not laughing. But you know what? You know what about that? I love that you said that because I can't stress that enough. I was kind of complaining earlier how people call me in the reverse, but it's help yourself with the liability, right? Because if you're looking to get divorced and you're thinking about it and you're like, I also want to disinherit sometimes it's better to talk to the divorce attorney and also the estate planning attorney at the same time, and we'll guide you in the order to make sure that by the time the divorce happens and then by the time the will's ready and all that, it all aligns, because it's almost like it kind of reminds me of when you have a CPA that you're working with for your taxes, but then you want to put money into the marketplace and you're looking to get advice there, so you're going to go contact a financial advisor, and sometimes you guys have meetings together. It's kind of the same thing. I mean, right, Patrick? I mean, at the end of the day, someone that's precautious and really is worried about what's going to happen to my money or my children, you should be talking about divorce and the estate planning all at once to discuss the liabilities. And like you said, yes, the will police is not going to come and tell you not to update it, but be careful updating it just on a whim without fully being advised of really what the best way to do that is. So for that person that's a question, thank you. But go ahead.
A lot of times it comes down to tax consequences from estate planning as well. You may not realize it, but if I know there's talk about doing away with the step up in basis, that loophole that's been there. Well, if that happens, then there's a tremendous tax liability that's created that could be avoided some other way. There's also gift taxes and death taxes in some ways. There's all kinds of things that are out there. And unless you may not like your ex, but I think you and your ex would both agree you don't want to pay the government. So if there's a way to avoid, that more money is going to the government because you didn't adequately plan for your demise through estate planning, why wouldn't you take advantage of that? You want to leave your kids as much as you can. So maybe it's better to look at a trust. Maybe it's better to look at arranging things ahead of time, or especially now when you have elderly parents. I have elderly parents. Um, if they keep assets, certain kinds of assets, and then they end up having to go into some kind of assisted living facility where they don't have assets to cover that, the government can look back 4 years and start coming back, taking money back, clawing money back from where where they didn't necessarily, you know, plan for that and gave money away. So
Right.
you have elderly parents that look like they need care. You need to start looking at that now. Don't wait until they're already in the facility, because it might be too late to do something with that. And again, this is just all goes back to trying to keep money away from the government, at least from my opinion.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because elderly parents and elderly individuals and uncles, especially, one of the more complicated of the people of the elderly population are the ones that either A, have a lot of children and don't have anything in place, or the opposite, I think, is equally can be as complicated when they don't have any children, they don't have any heirs. That could be quite complicated too, because I've represented, Patrick, a couple of elderly folks that don't necessarily have a son or daughter that they either get along with, or perhaps just no kids at all. And I always wonder, with them, like at what point do they decide to come and see an estate planning attorney? And if you're listening to this and you know someone like that, consider it sooner than later. Like, have them at least meet with someone, because one of the things with the elderly population, along with like really anybody, is like your health it can decline at any moment. So that is the importance, because as attorneys we can only do things when someone is healthy, competent. Outside of that, if they're not, we can't even work with them, because they can't even retain us. And so that's just something to keep in mind, and people kind of forget about that sort of thing, part. And I always like to tell people, so we focus a lot on like families and stuff and children, but the elderly population is equally as important for people that might need our services. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, Patrick.
And along those same lines, anybody's selling you a kit, a do-it-yourself kind of thing, you need to run like heck the other direction. I know it was real in vogue to sell irrevocable trust kits once upon a time, that people would,
My goodness.
it was a cookie cutter kind of thing. There is no cookie cutter solution to any kind of family situation. There's just nothing
No,
in
there
the
isn't.
law that's going to let you say, hey, here's this little kit of 20 papers that I can sell to anybody. It's going to work for everybody. It doesn't work for everybody. So don't think, well, because I saw this online at 2 a.m. that says, hey, I can pay $300 and have this kit and it's going to take care of it. Don't fall for that. Call somebody who actually knows what they're doing. Again, even if you get the kit, you're going to read it and not know what half the language means, because face it, lawyers, we use fancy words so we can get paid a lot of money. That's why they're in there. So you might as well pay somebody who's actually going to teach you what those things mean, to make sure you're accomplishing what you want.
And don't give the secrets away, Patrick. Don't give our secrets away. No, but when you say a kit, I was thinking about like gardening kits. You ever bought a gardening kit? I mean, it's like you put the
Do I look like I garden stuff?
maybe your wife does, but in general, like there's some things you can DIY, like a garden kit's one of them. But no, your estate plan, where like your money that you worked really hard for in your entire life, not being protected because you don't want to pay for an attorney, that is not wise. That is a poor. If there's any decision that you make in your lifetime with money, that is a poor decision. Like because again, I have had clients, Patrick, that have said to me, I went online and I have X amount in assets, and it's a significant amount that you would think this person certainly has the funds to pay, or perhaps it's the opposite. They don't have the funds to pay. Maybe they don't have a ton of assets, but they still go for the online option. It's not about cheap and fast. It's about what protects you, what is not going to cost your family an arm and a leg. Because I always tell people with estate planning, you are doing it for yourself, but you're really doing it for your family, because they're the ones that have to deal with things once you're no longer here, or if you're incapacitated. Like they're the ones that deal with that. So do it for your family. If you love your family, spend the extra money. I promise you will not regret it, because something in place is better than nothing, right, Patrick? I mean, at the end of the day, something is better than nothing.
Well, generally, I would say yes. I've had cases come to me, though, where they lived in 15 different states. They have houses in 3 or 4, and they got this little irrevocable trust kit that they created and filed in Illinois. And all the properties, some's a community property state, some isn't. And they're looking at me, wanting me to figure that out. I would much rather them have gone to an estate attorney to figure out how to set it up appropriately at the beginning, because trying to unwind that in a divorce is damn near impossible and sure costs a lot of extra money. So I'd say talking to an attorney and figuring it out is better than trying to figure it out on your own. And it'll save you more money down the road. Just in the long run, either you or your heirs will save more money by setting up correctly the first time.
Exactly. And just another question that came in, maybe this is something we can discuss, or we might have already discussed it, but is there a way to give your spouse a partial amount of your wealth or assets and preserve the rest for your family?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, there is a way to do that. Patrick, you can.
Marital protection trust. That'll do it.
Exactly.
Or you can set up a trust for the benefit of your children. You can set up a trust for the benefit of anybody, really.
Yep.
But there's certain protections and certain benefits to doing it for a spouse or a child. If you've got that child who you love them, but they can't hold money for nothing, you can do spendthrift trusts. You can do all kinds of stuff to prevent people from running through money inappropriately. Or, let's say you have some minor children and you want to make sure that, hey, they don't get the money until they turn 30 years old, because what 18-year-old do you want to give several $100,000 to? There's ways to do that to make sure that the money is not spent unwisely and it's there to care for them. But you're going to have to set that up through an estate planning document. It ain't going to happen just because you wished it to.
Yeah. And even as attorneys, we can also draft it so that it's certain ages. Like some people will say, well, I don't want my kid to have, all of it at 18, maybe only 10%, and then 20% when they're 20, and then 25%. So on and so forth. And so that can be drafted. So don't worry about that. But again, you're not going to find it online, because the online people, they're just doing boilerplate, and they're saying a prayer that you don't have to use that ever. But really, it's what it is. So thank you, Patrick, for kind of enlightening us. And so if anybody wants to contact you, Patrick, where can they contact you?
Smoke signals, carrier pigeons, anything's working right now. Our office telephone number is 865-637-6258. Again, 865-637-6258. Handling primarily family law and family immigration law issues in Tennessee, mostly Eastern Tennessee, east of Nashville. I've gone to Memphis a few times. I like Memphis. Food's great.
I like Memphis. I've been there.
I wouldn't pay me to drive that far.
It's too far.
Well, I'll do it if you want to pay me to, but I don't think I'm worth it. There's plenty of good lawyers in Memphis I can refer you to. But anything on the eastern half of the state, we probably have a case there, or we have had one there.
Awesome. Great. And so also, in case there was a question that came in real quick I want to address. Someone had asked if I have a baby, when should I get my will done? Immediately, because you have a child now. So feel free to let me know. I can help you. Where you can contact me is you can always call our office, which is 773-373-9592. You can text that number as well to set up a consultation, and we'll be happy to assist you. And so I want to thank all the viewers for the questions, and Patrick for joining me as always. Always a pleasure being with you. I feel like you teach me something new every time. So I appreciate that. Oh, come on. But you know what? You're wise. That's important, because the viewers, they appreciate it. I promise. So we encourage you, though, for next time, don't wait to speak to anyone. For the viewers that were asking questions, I know you're asking, when can I do this one? Now, I mean, there's no better time than the present. And at the very least, the consultations we do are free, and actually you could do them from the comfort of your own home. So we do virtual consultations for those of you not wanting to come in, especially with COVID restrictions. Maybe you want to stay at home. We totally respect that. But again, you just want to think about, when is a good time? The time is now. There's no better time to wait. So there's no official end to the pandemic right now, but protecting your children's future and your future is definitely a timely issue. So thank you again for your questions, and contact us so we can help you and your legacy. So I invite you here to join us next week, Tuesdays, for Pink Mike Legal Confessions, which is at 1:00 on Tuesdays. And invite friends, family, anyone that is interested in this. You can always watch it later as well. And we hope to see you again next week. So again, Patrick, thanks so much for your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your day too.
Oh, you too. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Take care. Thank you, everyone.